Hello and welcome to episode 257 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. This is another big one. We are continuing our top 50 games of all time series. This is going to be part 2 in that series, games number 40 to 31. So we're going to go around the table talking about our 40th through 31st favorite games of all time. For those who didn't listen to the last episode, I don't understand you because why would you start on this episode? But in case you didn't hear that one, we are restricting the description of each game to 1 minute, so we're going to try to make this nice and snappy. So once people start talking about their games and describing them, we have 1 minute to complete that. Hopefully that will be fun for you. And so that's it. Let's start it off. Neilan, tell us about game number 40 on your list.
Game number 40 is slipping a little bit down 6 spots. This is one of 2 Stefan Feld games on my list. I'm kind of like a weird Stefan Feld fan in that the games that I like of his are the ones that no one else seems to like nearly as much. One of those being In the Year of the Dragon. This is the game where it feels so good because of how bad it feels constantly that all of your people are dying. It's a game where you have a bunch of different professions that you're sort of accumulating in your palaces, and then these events come up. Now, the events sort of happen in a random order over the course of the game, and if you don't have enough rice by the time the famine event shows up, people in your palace will die, and so on for all the other events. It's like everyone is at constant risk, so it's about accumulating the professions at the right time in order to best utilize them by the time that you need to. But everyone is also fighting over the ability to get these professions and their various actions. So it's very, very tight. It often feels really, really bad, but it just is on such a very tight razor edge that I can't help but like it. This is In the Year of the Dragon by Stefan Feld.
This is a super, super brutal game, and not brutal in the like you versus your friend cutthroat brutal way. Just the game is brutal. I've told the story many times before, but I'll say it again. Neilan and I were taught this game by our good friend Dean, and I'll never forget his description because as he was relaying the rules, he would say, you have to do this and this, or your people will die. And then literally the next sentence was, or you can do this and this, or your people will die. Like he said the phrase, or your people will die 10 times. And I was like, wow, what are we in for in this game? But yeah, I have enjoyed this for sure.
It does have the thing that where, despite the brutality mostly being of your like own creation, the worker placement spots in this are tight. If you're really hoping for something not to get utilized by someone else at the table and it does, you can just be really in a tough
yes
spot.
Yeah, for sure. But thankfully, this is a game where even though you can get really hurt by not playing correctly or just missing something, it is relatively short. So it's not something along the lines of Food Chain Magnate where if you mess up early, you could be really out for a while. So I appreciate that as well. So In the Year of a Dragon is a game where people die. But my number 40 game, which is new to the list, you could say is unkillable. New to the list, number 40, Splendor. Splendor is a game that came out a number of years ago and has, as I sort of alluded to, been a game where a lot of games come out and they're crowned the Splendor killers, the game that will replace Splendor. And to be honest, like, Splendor has not been on my list since we started doing this, and so maybe it was killed for me, but I have now played Splendor a number of times, both in person and on BGA, and I have really, really grown to appreciate and love it. Splendor is a game where you are acquiring gems, which lets you buy cards, and then those cards, in turn, will represent those gems and sort of like build your engine. So if I use red gems and green gems and blue gems to buy a red card, that red card gives me 1 red gem for future purchases, and you just get bigger and bigger, your engine gets stronger and stronger, and it's really quick race to 15 points. A game that I had, again, played, thought not much of, but being able to play it now more and more has really, really made it grow in fondness for me. Splendor, my 40th favorite game of all time and new to my list.
It's just so clean. One of my earliest memories in the hobby is everyone talking about Century Spice Road. And like, I question really anyone's sanity who actually believes that Century Spice Road is better than Splendor. It's just not on the same plane of existence.
I remember playing Century Spice Road the first time, like when it first came out, and thinking, oh, this is actually pretty new. This is interesting. Like maybe it is a Splendor killer. But recently, in addition to playing Splendor a number of times over the last year, I played Century Spice Road a number of times, and it's not even in the same class. You're absolutely right. Like Splendor is such a better game.
And there's that Splendor Duel, Mark, which I'm very excited to show you. I think you'll really, really love that.
Add it to the Dice Tower West list.
All right. My 40th favorite board game of all time is a novelty, is a trifle. I think that people, when they bring out like Crokinole, are thinking they're doing this, but they're not. It is an oddity, and that is Zendo. Zendo is a game of logic, and Neilan, of all people, will tell you that it's inductive logic, Kellen, right? It's not deductive like my favorite games. It's inductive logic, where you use pieces to make a rule, and then every other player at the table tries to suss out that rule. Red triangles must touch blue cylinders. That could be the rule. And every player will test it out by seeing one example of the rule done correctly, and then you have to test that and say, does this follow the rule or does this not follow the rule? And then guess what the rule is. I don't have this as some higher level playing where we're all doing ultra clever things, but I think when you want to break out a novel experience, try a board game that no one has ever tried before, I don't think it can get weirder than Zendo. I think that I love bringing this out for new groups and seeing people go, what? What are we doing right now? We're playing Zendo, my 40th favorite board game of all time.
Yes, of the Looney Pyramid games, of which there are a ton. They even had like a Pyramid Arcade, which was like a series of all the Pyramid games all in one, which I found very like lukewarm. Zendo is by far the best. Zendo is fantastic. You said you brought this out with new players. Would you consider this a game that you could play with non-gamers, like a gateway sort of game? I've never considered
I mean, I don't consider it a gateway game because it's a gateway to nowhere because there's nothing after you get in the Zendo
right.
gateway. But yeah, I mean, I think that like it has that sort of grade school puzzle where this not like that, but this like that. And just something about the like setting out a structure and saying this follows my rule and then good luck with it. And then I think the other thing that the latest version does is like you don't have to come up with the rule if you don't want to. There are a bunch of cards with little sliders on them, like the completed structure needs 1, 2, or 3 red pieces. So you don't even have to be creative in coming up with what that is. So yeah, I would show this to non-gamers. Again, I would wonder the context that would be. I would bring this as the potential oddity for a specific type of game night that I could flex to. Oh, like we're not really going to be, this is not a Euro game night at all. Like Zendo would be a great wild card to be like, I could show them something they've never seen before.
My 39th favorite board game of all time is Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. This is falling down about 9 spots on my list. And the thing I really, really appreciate about Deception is that in the realm of social deduction, this is one that I find fairly accessible. I still think you're going to have new players sort of balking at the idea of being the murderer and sort of being under that pressure. But I do think there is something about like the open conversation of this and the vehicle of just simply looking at other people's cards and just saying, yeah, I don't think it could be Mark based on the clues that we're being given. It doesn't seem like it lines up with the evidence that Mark has in front of him. I think that one key point that Deception makes is allowing space for everyone to talk. There's always room for people to spin a yarn that it doesn't necessarily throw them under the bus. And I think that makes it like fairly accessible in the space. It's not as easy just to point your finger at, say, someone like, nah, you're definitely the murderer. Like everything you're saying is like complete nonsense. That is Deception, Murder in Hong Kong.
I think that social deduction games are on their way out. For me.
In general, like
for me. No, I wanted you to react negatively and then say for me. I remove this from my top 50. Every social deduction and perhaps to a lesser extent, every party game has like a limited shelf life, and I'm trying to figure out how to suss and place those games on my list, knowing that I loved it. It's still great, but like it hasn't come out in 2 years and likely won't unless I have a specific group of social deduction gamers who really want to play it.
I remember first playing this when I think it was first the Taiwanese version. It was like called like CSI or something. I can't remember what it was, but just thinking it was amazing. But my problem with it is that I feel like it quickly devolves into like having 2 or 3 candidates as the person who was the murderer and then getting to that. It's not a bad thing. You sort of like have the potential candidates winnowed down quite early. But yeah, no, this is a game that I would definitely, speaking of gateway games, play with people who are not typically gamers. They usually get a kick out of it.
Along with Chicago Express. Your favorite game to show new people.
Yeah, Gateway Night over here is Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, and Chicago Express. That's what we do.
In that order to kind of thematically sort of take them along the journey.
Yeah, right. No, it's all about the thematics in this household. Anyhow, Another thing it is about in this household is the 39th favorite game of all time for me. This was once known as Web of Power, then China, then Han, and now it is Iwari. The thing I like about Iwari is a abstract area control game where you are sort of working on a couple of different levels. You're trying to both lead the number of settlements. You're playing cards that are different colors represented by the different colors on the board, and that will allow you to place either settlements, which are these little tents, or totems, which are these pole that is in each area. And at the end of every round, you will score based on whoever has the majority in the different areas, so more of an area majority game. And it's a game that, again, has a relatively thin rule set, but a lot of difficult decisions. Like every round of Iwari, you are battling with, can I place my totem here? That's going to allow me to score here, but now I'm weak in this area. And just a lot of push and pull, give and take, difficult decisions. The production on Iwari is fantastic. It's beautiful, and another reason that I've enjoyed it so much. So, yeah, another tight area majority, really tough game, real cutthroat. Number 39, Iwari.
I have one thing to say to you, Mark.
Yes.
It really?
What?
This is such a miss, Mark. This is not deserving of your top 50.
Interesting.
The word I said was, I tried to add really to after IW, which is a pretty hard word to say. It really.
Got it.
Like, okay, it's short. Love that. Love to see it. But it's like so much of it is driven by cards that are out of your control. Like a lot of it can be. To be the most efficient, you have to have the right cards. And then the latest production is like beautiful, but over the top insane to the point of like not being useful. Yeah.
Sure.
With huge colorblind issues for red and orange. I don't get this one. I don't get it. I don't get why you get it. What do you get that I don't get? Really?
Yeah, I can't believe that you're so against it. The colorblind thing aside, which is something that I don't struggle with, so I can't speak to that, and that can be a serious issue. I do agree with you that the production is quite over the top and to the point where it does hurt some of the playability of the game. But it's such a... I don't think that the card draw is that tough because you can always play cards like as wilds. And I thought a stripped down area majority game would be sort of up your alley, but I guess not. That's what I like about it. I like the fact that it's like a really short rule set for a game that is all about area majority. And you know that if you go strong on one side, you're getting weak on another part of the board, and you always have to balance those decisions.
Yeah. I think I want to like this more than I do. Yeah. And that's why I wonder where it's coming from, because there's many years of people just loving this one.
And I mean, it speaks well of you that even though you're like an area majority fighting sort of guy, that you can say that this is not your style. So I appreciate that, but of course you're wrong. So 39 for me, Iwari, which is, again, new to the list. So we got two newbies to my list, two newbies.
All right, it's me again?
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to follow up saying a really over and over again and thinking that was going to work. My number 39th favorite board game is a double crossover with Mark. It is a train game. It is a train game from the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia. It is the one and only Stephenson's Rocket. I don't find it as intuitive as Mark did in his description. I find like how you score points quite unintuitive, but the actual aspect of the game that I love the most is that you are making these train lines, but actually you may want to ram your train line into another train line and score points in the dissolution of your train. So it has this, very much feels like Acquire to me, a game that I have loved from my childhood. So this is Reiner's take on a cube rail style train game, and one that just really works for me and doesn't quite feel like anything else that I've got. It has all that tight jostling of who's going to move what rail line and when, and how to have the most stock of one. I really enjoy this one. It feels like there's a lot to explore and uncover, and I feel like I have many years of service still ahead of me with Stephenson's Rocket.
A quick question for you. I know that people who compare Acquire to Stephenson's Rocket, and especially those who like Acquire more than Stephenson's Rocket, have a problem with the veto part of it, where every round, if you're deciding to move your train, you have to allow for a veto chance. So let's like, okay, I'm going to move the train. Does anyone want to veto? And some people find that like a laborious part of like every round. Okay, are we going to do this veto? How do you feel about the veto aspect of it?
So in the wrong game, you can basically like force everyone else to pay for, like, they're going to pay. So it actually becomes just an extorting game, which I find like hysterical with the different groups. So I'm all for it. I can see it derailing it, pun intended, from the mind that brought you it, really. And yeah, not a problem for me, but I can see how someone would dislike that.
My number 38 is actually another cube rail game. This is new to my list and one that I didn't expect to like shoot up as far as it did, but Iberian Gauge is a game that I've played again and again in 2022 and really, really, really loved. It has a very, very simple structure to it where you are buying stocks, and then the stocks that you buy also determine the order and the number of times that you're able to take actions in each of the rail companies. So you might be incentivized to buy stocks just for the value that that company holds, obviously, or for your ability just to run that train company into the ground if you're playing with an especially cruel group. If someone buys the last action of a given train company, for example, then they might just sort of completely use that to sabotage that train line, which is a very viable strategy and really, really, really fun. That is Iberian Gauge. It's kind of the second stock game that's kind of snuck onto my list this year, which kind of maybe, I don't know, could
I like it.
Well,
I like
this.
This.
Yeah, the 18XX future.
I know. Once we play 1846 or 1889 at Dice Tower West, it's all over. Wait till next year's list.
This is just going to be every 18XX game.
That's
the release strategy of releasing Irish Gauge. Again, I know these were new done editions, but releasing Irish Gauge before Iberian Gauge was definitely the way forward, because like I know no one who prefers Irish Gauge to Iberian Gauge. It's just not even on the same like stratosphere. Mark, tell me I'm wrong, Mr. Trainman.
I think you're right. I don't really have as clear a sense as you do, but you're probably right. And speaking of this, like, this is a fantastic game. I love Iberian Gauge. I like all the cube rail games that I've played so far, and it was tough. Again, I think recency bias is what gave Chicago Express the edge, but you would do well with any of these games for sure. They're all great. My 38th favorite game of all time is another new to the list. This is the third consecutive new to the list game, and this is a Rosenberg. This is Feast for Odin. So this is a game that I played and enjoyed before, but this is a game where BGA, the implementation on BGA, has allowed it to rise on the list. Feast for Odin can be a daunting game to get to the table. It is renowned for the fact that it has 85 worker placement spots. It's a worker placement game with this incredibly large worker placement board, and sometimes it's hard to get to the table. And so BGA helps sway that fear because it's all set up for you. And getting the chance to play it with regularity on BGA has really allowed me to enjoy it. If you're looking for an Uwe style game where you can sort of like try a bunch of different things out, all the workers placement spots allow that for you with Feast for Odin, although you also have to find a lane and sort of go down it. Are you going to go whaling? Are you going to go hunting? Are you going to go with the animal strategy? So there is that aspect of Uwe games that we've grown to love. So Feast for Odin has definitely risen on my list, and now it is my 38th favorite game of all time.
I have two thoughts. A, absolutely yes, about time.
Boom.
It's funny, actually, because I think BGA is not a place I enjoy playing a Feast for Odin. I think a Feast for Odin benefits from physicality in a huge way, just like the acquiring of bits. And also, a Feast for Odin does not have the Norwegians expansion, which is the only way I will now play a Feast for Odin given the opportunity. So that's just a pity. Hopefully that's coming down the line. But yeah, fantastic game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do wish the Norwegian expansion was there. And I get the physicality of puzzle pieces and that like sort of Tetris aspect, which is tactical and fun to feel and fun to figure out. But selling the idea of playing Feast for Odin can be rough, especially if people who don't know the rules, you've got to like go over these worker placement things. Although it's not as complicated to teach as the 48 or 85 worker placement spots make you think, because there are a lot of like variations on like the same sort of thing. But I'm just glad that I've got a chance to play it with some regularity.
I could not disagree more about the physicality of playing a Feast for Odin. I thought that once a year on Neilan's birthday, I'd be willing to play what he wanted, and that led to a game of a Feast for Odin recently. All of those trays and like the dual-sided nature of having to flip stuff over to find the thing that you just got, like it's annoying as hell. It's like you're basically saying you like playing with Legos, and I don't want to play with Legos during a board game.
That is at least some part of the appeal, is that you look at these trays of bits, you're like, oh man, I could have that, I could have that, I could have that. It's definitely not nothing.
Kellen would say it's less than nothing.
I feel like gameplay above all on the crest, and you guys keep coming up with stupid reasons.
With the exception of
Feast for Road and Anachrony.
Feast for Road, and yeah, that's what we've always said it's been. It was both of those things on the bottom of the crest filling up with text, guys. All right. My 38th favorite board game of all time is perhaps the second biggest loser. Try to unpack that sentence. Someone has to win the biggest loser. This is Codenames, and one that I am shocked and appalled to hear that Mark has removed from his list. I think he is lying to himself, lying to the people. If someone comes to you for a recommendation of a board game, they want a party game to play with their friends, and you say, do you have Codenames? This is a staple. I see this in coffee shops where there are no board games, but they have Codenames. You can acquire it for $15 or less. If you do not have Codenames, if you have parties, if you need to have couples games or group games, Codenames is the first stop on the expressway to lighter party word games.
Expressway to Joytown.
The expressway. Mark, you remove Codenames from your list. Defend yourself. Okay. You're just saying I love Feast for Odin, but you're not on the Joy Train to Expresstown.
Here's the thing.
Okay.
Here's the thing. If I was you, I would be firing back. Oh, it's bad and all this stuff. But I'm going to say, look, you might be right. I'm looking at my list here. It's number 66. So it just barely missed the cut. 66 of thousands of games.
It was in your top 10 just a few years ago. Do you have no conviction?
I'm a person who changes with the times.
Conviction above all. No, gameplay, I thought that's what we said.
The thing is, again, you're probably right because I always feel like I'm burnt out on Codenames, but every time I play it, I'm like, this game is fantastic. So you make a good point there.
It's just like
still number 66, but
all your games are getting thrown into the fire, right? And you have to keep getting rid of them. Codenames is going to last a while. It's going to last a while.
Yeah, but I'm not going to save Codenames from the fire. I'd rather have any of these games that I spoke about before Codenames. I'm not going to, because Codenames is like, it's good. It's solid.
It's an apocalyptic event. You're tossing all your games into the fire, and you'd rather have Dungeon Fighter. You'd rather sit there and it's you and the last 6 people on Earth, and you want Dungeon Fighter over Codenames.
See, I'll tell you a problem with Codenames. See, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to have to tear these games down. I'm trying to be positive here. But a problem I do have with Codenames is the downtime between turns. You can't tell me that's not a problem. When it's not your team's turn, or even if it is your team's turn and you're waiting for the clue giver, like if you're the clue giver, I'm going to be like, okay, Kellen's the clue giver. I'm going to have to wait here like 10 minutes before he comes up.
That's not how I play Codenames. I play fast and loose.
But kidding aside, I do legitimately have a little bit of an issue with the downtime on turns.
Well, why don't you go ahead and just let him know? I can't remember what his name is now, but he's from the genius that brought you Galaxy Trucker.
Yeah, exactly. Right. His best game. Funnily enough, this is actually also my second biggest faller on my list, coincidentally.
Biggest loser.
Biggest loser is the nomenclature.
His biggest loser. Sorry, Kellen. This is Inish falling 15 places. I really like Inish. Don't get me wrong. Look, it is still on this list. It's a solid game. I will still happily endorse Inish and continue to play it. I just have been having less and less enthusiastic games of it recently. I do think that this is part and parcel to something that, to Mark's credit, he has said pretty consistently, it does tend to run longer than you want it to a lot of the time. That said, I think that what Inish does in terms of the purity of its dudes on a mapness, of just having every fight boil down to basically a negotiation. Do we want to stop fighting or do we want to keep going? And then having those sort of 3 victory conditions that you're constantly jostling for, it always leads to like a tense finish where everyone kind of just feels they can just about get the edge up to steal the win. Inish is an excellent game, and it is my number 37.
Keep it falling. Keep it falling. Not a fan of Inish. Inish with the expansion is fine, but Inish by itself, vanilla Inish, no.
I don't think that the expansion...
Too long. Bash the leader. No, thank you.
From the man who likes Iwari.
Yeah, what? Iwari's not too long. Keep it falling. Keep it falling.
I was contemplating returning to my really joke, but then I'm like, no, it wasn't good. Keep it to yourself, Kellen. That didn't work.
All right. So with one hand, I've struck Neilan. by bashing his choice of Inish. But with the other hand, I will welcome him back because my 37th favorite game of all time is the 4th new game to my list, and it is a double crossover with Neilan. This is Imperium the Contention.
Love it.
Yes, Neilan has already spoken about this, but this is a sort of Magic the Gathering / 4X card game that plays quickly. One thing I love about it is it plays fast, but also the factions are asymmetric and you sort of get going immediately. There's not like a long build-up phase to get your faction going and to get your planes and all that stuff out. It was my favorite game of Dice Tower West, this last Dice Tower West, and one that I've played since then and enjoyed a great deal. I just love how much it packs in a small package in a small time frame. Just hits the ground running. Very asymmetric, very fun. It was fun looking at the cards, seeing the cards you can build. Just loved it. 37, new game to the list, Imperium the Contention.
It packs a lot of flavor into each of those faction decks as well. I mean, like,
yeah,
in the way that every color in Magic feels pretty distinct, they do a good job of making those faction decks feel very distinct. Like, one is the deck that's going to, like, get your ships up and running very quickly and swarming the board. The other is like, hey, stand back and shoot from a distance. It's got some cool stuff in there. This is a rock solid game.
Jury is out on rock solid. That's a strong sentence. Why are you laughing? Okay. It's hard in a game when I was out halfway through it. Like, I literally was out and could not win.
Yeah.
And we still played for another half hour. So you're like, oh, it's short, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, over half the game, you guys all ganged up on me and I lost, which, congratulations.
I will say this, that all of my games since that first game have been a 2-player, where, it's obviously decidedly shorter. It feels more like a head-to-head dueler. And I think it's much stronger at that count than at the the typical multiplayer conflict problem that happens at higher.
I want to play it. I just think that we're putting it very high up on the list and calling it rock solid, and people are listening. So just make sure you believe what you're saying. All right, this is new to my list and perhaps the most gifted board game for me. I've gifted this more than 5 times. This is Azul. If I'm paring down my collection to 50, Azul makes the cut easily, might make the cut to 10. This is a beautiful abstract game of over your neighbors at every possible opportunity. You can play this in a way that everyone is happy and just colorfully building out their tableau, but you can play this in the meanest way possible, which is evaluating all the hops in the center of the table and taking the one that hurts Neilan the most. As you can imagine, that is how I choose to play Azul. Just a fantastic, lighter to mid-ish weight game that will never leave my collection. I could not anticipate or imagine a world where this will leave my collection. And the fun comes from what your opponents choose to leave you, similar to many of my favorite card games, but in a little bit more of an elaborate form. Azul. And the OG, okay? None of this Azul 17 that we're on right now. Like, the shape Azul, in my mind, right, has one shape. And they done that up with hexagons in the Queen's Garden. Don't get that in my Azul.
Along with this being a year for a Splendor renaissance for me, it was also a year of an Azul renaissance for me. So got a chance to play Azul a number of times as well. And yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Man, that game, if you're playing that game 2-player versus like 3 or 4-player, that game is a whole different animal. It is so cutthroat at 2 players. Crazy. So mean.
Yeah, I think like Kellen said, it flexes both ways. It can be like a fun, casual experience where you're sort of like puzzling things out independently of each other, or it can just be like really, really, really harsh if you're playing it the way we'd play it. And I think it works just as well in both ways. My 36th favorite game of all time is new to my list. This is Arc Nova. What? I'm sorry. I'm reading my note here, which says animals are cool and putting them in cages is cooler, and I don't remember writing that.
Oh.
Wow.
I don't know why I
Neilan.
wrote that, because I don't think that's what I meant when I wrote that. Anyway, creating a zoo of your animals, it's a really cool experience. This combines the sort of like the card drafting, which I didn't really loved in Terraforming Mars, but with a very much more on the board spatial puzzle of mapping out your zoo, getting all of your enclosures in the appropriate places, the right size, so that you can house the animals as they come in. There is comboing of animals that come out. There is a whole fascinating action selection system, which I love, which is somewhat borrowed from Civilization New Dawn, where you have a card row of expanding and improving abilities that increase in power. Ark Nova is very cool. New game this year. I love this.
Building enclosures, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Just call them cages. They're cages, Mr. Cage Lover.
This is
Mr. I love to put
a
animals in
ecologically friendly zoo, Mark. I think you'll find.
You're putting them in there for their own good.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
I enjoyed Ark Nova. I did enjoy it way more than Terraforming Mars, which is a game I don't really like too much. I love that action selection system from Civilization and New Dawn. That's a great addition for sure.
I don't know. I guess I can't object to every game, so I'll withhold my objections to Ark Nova. I can see why people find it fun. Neilan, I thought you were better than the people.
I will say this, like I can concede that there is some funkiness in card draw in this game. I've had that issue with it, where you have to be okay with a card coming up on the last round that works really, really well for one player and doesn't work for other players. And that's a problem. I will concede, but that doesn't deter me loving playing this game as much as I do.
My issue with my 36th favorite game of all time and where to place it is that it can feel like more of an activity than a game. And in fact, it probably is best played as an activity rather than a game. And that is True Colors. This was a game that used to be on my top 10 that has dropped a little bit just because when I have a game night, it's not necessarily a game that I want to play when I want to do a puzzly sort of gamey thing. But with the right group, and right group is extremely important when it comes to True Colors, it can be one of your greatest experiences of all time. In True Colors, what you have is everybody assigned a color, and then a question will come up that says, you know, your computer broke, who are you going to call to fix it? Or questions like that. And then you have to vote on who around the table you would call on in that specific instance. If you think it's one of two different people, you can put one of each of their colors in there. So if Neilan is red and if Neilan's orange, I should say, and Kellen is red, I could put an orange and red card in there. But if I think it really applies to one person, I can put a double of their color in a secret box, which is another aspect of the game where your votes are secret. And so the votes are shuffled up and then you reveal it and then you learn what your friends think about you and what you think about your friends. It can be mean for sure, but it can also be incredibly illuminating and fun and spark a lot of conversation. We have had a really, really great time of this at one of the first Barrage Cons where we played it with the friends and resulted in a lot of discussion, a lot of energetic, I would say, discussion. I will say that you definitely need to play with people that you know, but if you are looking for a game that will provoke thought and maybe provoke a couple arguments, True Colors is the way to go. It's my 36th favorite game of all time, down 2 spots from last year.
I absolutely adore this game. It's like if I had the group or if I was a college student, for example,
yes,
this would be like top 10. And so sometimes like it just becomes a function of like, when would the appropriate group to play this with, you know, and when I busted this out with family, we learned some uncomfortable truths. Like my brother's wife would rather go with Christina to a nudist colony than her husband. And we still sit with that one every Christmas when we come. Yes. All right. My number 36th favorite board game of all time is another new game to the list, and this is my ode to the brilliant Shinzawa, a Japanese designer of primarily trick-taking games. This is American Bookshop, an absolutely fantastic, clean, trick-taking game with just a few little twists. And those twists are, there are the exact amount of suits as there are players. If you have the most cards of that suit at the end of the game, you score positive points for each one. If you don't, you score negative points for each one. And then the other twist is that there, depending on player count, is always a total value of all cards that allow you to win the trick before the end of everyone even playing a card. So there's always two things you're worried about: playing too high and giving a player at the table the ability to just take it all right away. Shinzawa has a lot of great trick takers, and I am the person who just, it's got to be one, right? So this is Ghost of Christmas, which has been famous recently. This is Mass Men by Oink Games. This is 9 Lives by Board Game Tables. Just an absolutely stunning design pedigree, and I have a lot of these, and I will play a lot of these. But for me, pound to pound, American Bookshop is the one for me.
I have a lot of really good memories of playing this at the last PAX Unplugged that I went to, which was, I guess, 2021.
And that adorable little box. It's a delight.
It is true. Book themed. It's got all these like normal books, and then one of the books is like a Cthulhu book, and you're like, why the hell is this is this what they think of us Americans in our bookshops?
It is certainly not the number one game that is in a book-shaped box, but it is up there.
And here
Kellen,
we
don't
are.
say anything.
Okay, don't. Yeah, you're right. It's like I can't object to everything, right? Then that's too much.
My 35th favorite game of all time is, in fact, the highest faller on my list. The biggest loser, sorry.
The biggest loser,
The biggest loser. This is Rising Sun. If you were to ask me if I was going to want to play Rising Sun at any given time, I would happily say yes. But I kind of alluded to this last year. I kind of felt like my group had a really kind of intense love affair with Rising Sun. We played it almost every week for a very long time, and then we were done. And I don't know that I will ever return to Rising Sun with that group. We've moved on to other games. And to some extent, I now feel like my best days with Rising Sun are behind me. I had some fantastic games of it with Mark, Kellen, and Christina. I had some fantastic games with that group of my colleagues. And I just don't think any game of Rising Sun could now ever live up to the games I've now had in the past. And this kind of bore out in recent games I've had of it, where I kind of just felt like it was falling flatter than I had remembered it. That said, still love this. I think the way that it bakes in sort of temporary alliances of convenience with a very compelling asymmetric dudes in the map game is still really, really, really cool. That is Rising Sun.
Yeah, spoiler, this actually also dropped off my list. Got a chance to play it this year and had a okay game of it. I still like a lot of what it does, but didn't feel like it held its spot in my top 50. My 35th favorite game of all time is another new to the list, although I think I had this on my list a couple years back. This is Anomia. This is another quick card sort of party game. In Anomia, what is happening is that everybody has a stack of cards, and you'll flip them over in turn until the symbol on your card matches the symbol on somebody else's card. And then at that point, you have to say something that is described on the other person's card before they'd say something described on your card. So it may be Neilan's turn. He flips a star symbol that says famous address. And I have had showing on the table a star symbol that says type of cereal. And so I'm eagerly watching for another star symbol to come up. And then when Neilan flips it over, I have to name a famous address before he names a type of cereal. And the first person to name it gets the other person's card, and it's like a point, and you keep going until all the cards have been claimed. And the word anomia comes from that feeling you get when you're trying to think of something really fast to say, and you go, that I guess is anomia. And that is something that happens repeatedly in anomia. I got a chance to play this a couple times with gamers and non-gamers this year. We had a great game of it, actually, at Dice Tower West, speaking of that, last year. And this is just a hit every single time I bring it up. Some people don't like it because it is very high stress, but I just absolutely love it. Have a great time every single time I play Anomia. My 35th favorite game of all time. Again, also new to the list.
That game that we played at Dice Tower West made me so want to have this somewhere on my list. It ended up just off of the bottom, unfortunately, but Anomia is an incredible game. And one of those games that, if you look at the rating that people have for it on BGG, does not do it any justice for how much fun this is and how much of it a hit it generally is with a lot of people. Like, I do think people do tend to find it stressful and bounce off of it, but you will be able to explain this in no time and have people having a great time very, very, very quickly.
It suffers from, and I'll represent the common person, the common man here. Similar to Pictomania, right? Like, there are those who can think at the speed of Anomia and those who can't. And if you play a game of Anomia and you aren't thinking at the same speed as everyone else, you actually can sit there and not, like, literally not participate. And I've had games with groups where I actually win it and have a great time, and then games where I physically can't say a word quick enough to even, like, actually participate in the game. So I would look at the reviews on BGG and think, like, hey, there's a lot of people here who just hate it by virtue of, like, they're not capable. Like, a lot of, like, 0, 1, 2 reviews alongside people who are just like, wow, this is fun. But when it's all singing and having a good time, like, Anomia can be quite fun.
That's totally fair. I would say that thankfully it's not a huge obligation in terms of cost and of time playing. So If you think it might be for you, maybe give it a shot. Another thing I want to point out is that there is a very important rule in Anomia, which is flip your cards away from you as you draw them from your deck, because if you flip them facing you, you get the advantage of, like, reading the card before everybody else sees it. It's a very important rule. It's one of the very few rules of Anomia. And I just want to say that at our play at Dice Tower West, there was a friend of the show who was not playing it that way. I will not name any names, but this person flipped the cards towards them. So,
a cheater.
There's a cheater in our midst. It was 100%.
All right. My 35th favorite board game of all time is a quintessential classic. It was originally Traders of Genoa. It is now Genoa. Very high again on the list of games that Neilan still has not played. I know Mark got it to the table.
No, I played Genoa.
What?
I've not played it with you, but yeah, I played it at Dean's like a couple of years ago. I think we've had this discussion before.
Don't tell me what we've talked about, Neilan. As I lick a knife for no reason on camera. Genoa is my preferred flavor of Euro game combined with negotiation because you can, in fact, dick around your friends, unlike Sidereal Confluence. You are moving through a bustling marketplace and auctioning off every action that you feel like taking and every resource that you can acquire there. It is exhausting and it can take a long time, but if you are a Euro gamer with a love of negotiation, I don't think you could do any better. I think it's quintessential Genoa, just an absolutely amazing board game.
I absolutely love this. As Kellen said, like I played it for the first time a couple years ago on his recommendation. I had heard nothing about this game before hearing about it from Kellen and absolutely loved it. It's like an incredible mix of Euro plus negotiation. And again, you get Euro plus negotiation with Sidereal, but it's all like cube conversion. It's all like positive, which is a great aspect to it, but with Genoa, like it's a lot more cutthroat and a lot more just like exasperation. Like I can't believe you're going to do this, or I can't believe you're selling it to this guy for that amount of money. There's a lot of that going on, and I absolutely love it.
Yep, and it's funny, right? These all exist on a spectrum, right? Of watching your game slip away, because this in another world is like a more Euro I'm the boss, right? Because it's like you do need to be involved in the trades. So sometimes it's better to like be involved in the trade and give Neilan more than you're getting, because as long as you're involved in the most of those trades, you'll come out ahead. But there's often times where you're just like, oh my God, Mark is winning. And if he trades one more time, like it's over for us. No one give him that card. And then Neilan's like, well, I'm in last place, so like I might have to make this trade. And you just start screaming. That is what Genoa will buy you. Great board game.
My 34th favorite board game of all time has fallen in 9 places. This is Spirit Island, and that's purely from lack of play. It's in all honesty been a while since I played Spirit Island, but with the bevy of expansions that have come out since the last time I played it, I've been excited to like return and see what all the new factions are about. Spirit Island is a heavy cooperative game where you are fending off invaders that appear on your island. You are each spirits with sort of immense, very asymmetric powers, and you are defending the natives of the island from invaders that are coming in. The thing that is really cool about Spirit Island is that I think, unlike a lot of cooperative games, everyone has a very, very distinct action set that they're able to sort of evoke, and no game like requires this much collaboration between very distinct abilities. Like, I will push this thing if you're then able to kill them, and working with what other people's strengths and weaknesses are in order to like overcome what does feel like at times insurmountable odds. And it's just very, very satisfying when you pull your team with your unique powers together to make it work. That is Spirit Island.
Spoiler, and this is probably not much of a spoiler, but Spirit Island is nowhere near my top 50. However, with my move towards solo gaming, I am very, very tempted to get back into Spirit Island and try playing it solo, and have a feeling that I will really, really enjoy it given the depth and the number of choices you can make with it. So looking forward to playing it in the upcoming year and seeing where it falls for me. For what it's worth, my biggest issue with a lot of co-op games is the quarterbacking and the fact that like one person can sort of lead it and make it less fun for other players. I know that people have said that there's so much information in Spirit Island that is not really an issue. It still sort of has been in times I've played it, so hoping solo it makes that a non-factor for me.
Yeah, I think with very disparate like skill levels, that could still be an issue if someone that's played it a lot with someone that hasn't. But in my experience of playing it with people that really didn't know the game that well together, yeah, you're just wrestling with what your spirit does more than you are worrying about what other people are doing.
Sure, makes sense. My 34th favorite game of all time is up 11 spots, and it sort of shares some DNA with the last 2 games I spoke about. True Colors and Anomia are sort of kind of gamey, kind of activity sort of games. And number 34 for me, Ricochet Robots, is no exception to that. Ricochet Robots is a game where you're placing a board out on the table, you're placing a number of robots out, And the way it works is each of the robots has to get to their home space, and they can do that by traveling in a very specific way. You can have them move until the very edge of a board, whether they hit a wall or another robot. And so they go until they stop by hitting one of those two things. And you have to just keep having them ricochet around the board until they get to their home base. But you have to figure out how to align other robots in order to get them to hit correctly. The twist, though, is that you're doing all this simultaneously with the other players, but also without touching any of the pieces. So in your mind, you have to calculate, okay, if I move this robot to this robot, move them here, move them there, move them there, okay, and then I can do that, and that's it, and then I got them all there. And you do that until you figure it out, and then you announce, okay, I have it in 26 moves, and then other players have to try to figure it out, and whoever can do it in the fewest amount of moves wins. This is weirdly the puzzle party game of choice for me. I have brought this to a birthday party because I was going to be there with some gamer folks and thought, oh, this would be a fun game to play with them, and then set it out and we started playing it, and people would walk by and say, wait, what are you guys doing? And then I explained it to them. And then all of a sudden, we had 20 people standing around this board trying to figure out how to move these robots in their head. It's like a total silent situation. Nobody's talking. Everybody's just focused on this board, trying to figure out how to move these robots in their head, and just had a great time. Not going to be a game for everyone, but the ability to have it just sit there and not have everybody have their player boards, it's like a shared experience. Love it every time I play it. Number 34, Ricochet Robots.
Neilan, have you played this?
Yeah, I have a couple of times. I now have a copy of it, which in my head, I imagine that's something that would be fun to set up at work in an office environment, to just have people come around and sort of try to solve it. It does have that sort of communal feel of hey, everyone take a shot at this, see how well you do.
It's just, it strikes me as a little Mensa masturbatory. A little bit.
It is definitely, it's not unlike hey, everyone see how quickly you can solve the Sudoku. It's definitely that. It's a puzzle for people to look at and sort of prove how smart they can be.
Using only your mind.
Right.
And Mark's very fast.
For what it's worth, I'm not even that great at it. I always am struck by people who come to that game and just can get it. I have a couple friends who are amazing at it. And rather than being upset that I keep losing, I just am blown away by how good they are. It's almost like a fun revelation about how good your friends are in this one very weird spatial aspect of thinking.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, there's something funny about you just set it up in the middle and no one talks and everyone has a good time, and that's the game, and it can play 25 people as long as they can see the board.
Right.
I had a copy of this and gave it to a fifth grade teacher because I thought that they would have more fun standing in a circle thinking themselves off. But my 34th favorite board game of all time is a double crossover with one and only Neilan. This is Agricola. That was you.
Yeah, it was me.
Okay, you were looking at me like I was confused.
No.
No, it is Agricola. Agricola is what worker placement actually is. I am now of the belief that unless you can block the placements, the game is not a worker placement game. It does not fit the criteria of worker placement, and words evolve. And so that is how this word is evolving. Agricola is about building your own farm, but it's actually about saying, Neilan took my wood, and then having to make do with reed or some other substandard resource to all the wood that is accumulated. I think there's something very visceral about the spots. If a spot is not taken, many of them just start adding more and more until, well, I've got to take it. That's enough wood to fill up my whole farm with fences. And there's something very, get your plan A, get your plan B. There is a lot going on in Agricola. This is the heavy Euro game that got me into Euro games, and one I could never see myself parting with. Uwe Rosenberg's finest. No feasts here, just famines. Agricola.
Yeah, I think I said
that.
it
No
when...
feast, just famines. That's good.
that is a good line. When I was speaking about Agricola, I very specifically said, the worker placement aspect of that is the thing that I do love about Agricola. And it is something that is not really represented in A Feast for Odin. But, I like that game for, wholly different reasons. But the competitiveness over spaces and the opportunity cost of looking at a spot that has, 5 wood in it and being well, I can't afford not to take this right now is the thing I love about Agricola. My 33rd favorite game of all time is Yellow and Yangtze, which I like to continually annoy everyone every year by saying it is better than Tigris and Euphrates. You know what? If I'm being honest, I don't have both of those games on my list, but I like both of them independently of each other. I do prefer Yellow and Yangtze, which is the reason I'm including it here. But what this game is a game of placing tiles onto this shared map where you are building out clusters of pieces that eventually become cities, and you're fighting for control of those cities in each of the disparate colors. You're trying to get points in each of those colors, and whichever color you have the least points of at the end of the game is your final victory point cost. So you sort of have to be diverse. You have to sort of be able to generate points in all of the colors in the game. Each of the colors lends itself like different aspects of the game, whether that's conflict or just the ability to expand wide. And it becomes this fascinating sort of spatial puzzle mixed with just careful hand management of the colors you have and saving them for the right opportunities.
I like Yellow and Yangtze. I will disagree with your initial take that it is better than its predecessor.
But Mark, you respect Legacy.
I do respect Legacy. I'm a big Legacy guy. I look to our ancestors.
And we care about games being Asian themed, so Yellow and Yangtze gets my vote.
Exactly. Here's the thing. If I were to like really distill why I prefer Yellow and Yangtze, I think like Tigris and Euphrates is fairly opaque, and sometimes I feel like the way that the game evolves in Tigris and Euphrates feels very chaotic. Like the way that the board starts to separate, cities start to crumble, doesn't always feel like it's in players' control. And I know that on a high-level play, obviously that's much less of a big deal. Yellow and Yangtze just feels that little bit more accessible, that little bit more readable, that little bit more forward plannable in a way that I kind of dig.
Yeah, I get that. My 33rd favorite game of all time is a sudden shift in gears from the last three games. So I had True Colors, Anomia, Ricochet Robots, which are light games you can play with anybody for the most part, more activities and games perhaps. Number 33 is a big, heavy game. This is Dominant Species. This is a game that probably is falling down the list for me. Again, it's down 2 spots from last year and probably going to fall if I don't get a chance to play it this year. But it's just a game where I love the sweep of it. I just love the idea that you are picking a type of creature. You're picking that's not genus. What is that? What are the
flora and the fauna?
No,
I think it's
a family, right?
Family. Works, yeah.
Yeah, family. So you're doing the amphibians or the mammals or the birds, whatever you want, reptiles. They all are asymmetric, although not grandly so. They're not crazy asymmetric. And you're just trying to fight for survival on this growing flora and fauna. And it's really brutal in terms of fighting for dominance and control. Another thing I really like about it in terms of the mechanics of it are the way that the actual actions are taking place. So there is a fixed row of actions that is on the board, and you are placing your workers out, knowing full well that they will fire off from the top action to the bottom action. So there's a lot of timing issues. Like, I really want to make sure that I have this resource for this action later on, so I have to place this piece out first and then place this out. But oh no, Kellen has jumped in front of me. Am I going to be able to do that? It's just a very fresh, although this is quite an old game, but it's a unique take on worker placement that I've always enjoyed. So it's that worker placement part, it's the fight for your survival part that has always made Dominant Species a game that I've enjoyed. Problem is, it is quite long and it can be very AP prone, so those are 2 strikes against it, but still hanging in there for me at number 33, down 2 spots, Dominant Species by the late great Chad Jensen.
Talk about a game where your worker placement is tight and harsh. I mean, that is Dominant Species to a T. For me personally, I think the dominance calculation ends up feeling like too time consuming and just, I don't know, fiddly in a way that really bugged me. I'd love to see a version of this game that kind of strips some of that fiddliness out. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of unlike anything else. I wish it was shorter and I wish it was slightly more streamlined, but that's yeah.
And I do have the sequel, which is Dominant Species Marine. I've yet to play it, so I've heard mixed things. I don't know if it's going to solve all the problems that people have with it, but it's definitely something to give a go. We're going to add that to the Dice Tower West playlist.
It kind of just gets depressing because there's so many of these games where we've still never even played them all together, 3 or 4 player, and
right,
it'll never happen. We could die.
Dice Tower West. We've already added it to the list.
I mean, I understand that, but how long is Dice Tower West?
Well, you guys could come early and stay late.
Come early, stay late. All right. Or just play Ricochet Robots standing in a circle and not even speaking to each other. My 33rd favorite board game of all time is Wizard. This is the classic card game This is a game that I bust out with my family almost every Christmas. This is a game where you play it really silly and you have to change some of the rules, but the main thing is that you're bidding on how many tricks you think you're going to win, and you can never have an exact equal amount of tricks won. And so when you bid, the player at the end must make a bid that makes the tricks unequal, so no one will be working together. It uses a system where you're supposed to start by dealing out one card and then play one hand and then deal out two cards and then play two hands and then deal out three cards and play three hands all the way up and then back down. I could say it all, but that would be annoying. I play it where you skip through some of these. You start with one card, then to three, then to five. This is sort of that family weight, old-timey game that you might play with a group of people. For my family, it's Wizard. I could never see myself getting rid of this. For many gamers, this game has become Skull King, which is Wizard, but with a bunch of optional stuff sort of added on top of it. I find that a little bit too chaotic for me, but if you've ever played or enjoyed Skull King, Wizard is the granddaddy there, and truly an amazing card game.
I remember you introducing this to us sometime last year, and I did enjoy it. It does feel like one of those games where if you were raised playing these kind of card games, it'd be like a game you played, like you said, every Christmas or every time you got a family get-together. So
my 32nd favorite game of all time is the only roll and write on my list is the best roll and write. It is Twice as Clever. And this is, again, a stand-in for, the series at large. Twice as Clever is my favorite of the ones I've played. This started with That's Pretty Clever, Ganz schön clever in German. This is basically just combos the dice game where you're going to be rolling dice and choosing a subset of those to mark on your sheet. But at every point, each of these little mini games as represented in your sheet for each of the die colors is also going to lead to different ways that you can bonus and combo and add marks to other sections of the board. So it's going to be marking sections in order to mark sections, to trigger points, to combo, to mark other sections to get lots and lots and lots of points. It's a really, really fun experience. Getting those combos to fire off is super, super satisfying. That is Twice as Clever.
Kellen, did you hear how he started this? He said this is a stand-in. This is a stand-in for other games. He's doing the exit thing what he did last year.
God.
No, I was
allowed.
quite distinct in saying that this is the game. This is the only one. If you were to pick one game from the series, this would be it.
Yeah, but you started this by saying this is a stand-in for other Ganz schön games. So
I wouldn't dare do that.
I'm gonna play the tape back. Anyhow, my 32nd favorite game of all time is another game that has dropped, although it's no change from last year, but I feel like it's dropping because it's another one that is a bear to play, although I've enjoyed every single play of it. This is a Board Game Barrage staple, Cthulhu Wars. This is probably hurt by the fact that I've moved and it's going to be tougher to play this with you guys, so we're going to add this to the Dice Tower West list of games to play. This is a game of huge minis and lots of dice being rolled, and this is like Ameritrash at its best, in my opinion. Although it's not purely Ameritrash, but you start with a faction of one of the Cthulhuan friends. You can be Cthulhu or one of his many friends. They all have very, very asymmetric powers, and you are fighting across a board, rolling a ton of dice when it comes to every battle, but not in a bad way, not in a way where the dice are deterministic, because you're rolling so many dice that the numbers sort of even out. For a person who doesn't generally like a lot of minis, anachrony aside, I love the big minis for this because it makes the game feel so much more impactful, so much more grand, so much more like an epic event. And just getting your unique tech tree leveled up is such like a fun, powerful feeling in this game. Just wish it didn't take so long. Just did wish it wasn't such a bear to introduce to new players. Number 32 for me, Cthulhu Wars, which was 32 on the last list as well.
While we always say gameplay over everything, unless it's Anachrony, unless it's a Feast for Odin, unless it's Cthulhu Wars.
Yeah,
No,
that's right.
Cthulhu, I don't like the minis. It's
Big,
in spite of the
splashy minis.
In spite
You
of
want
the
to play
minis.
Cthulhu Wars with like
Yes.
cardboard chits?
I would prefer to play it Pokemon rethemed with cardboard chips. I would love it. I would lap it up. All right. My 32nd favorite board game of all time, for whatever reason in my mind, feels like Innovation's more boring brother.
Good lead in.
Great endorsement.
No. But my 32nd favorite game of all time. This is Race for the Galaxy. And I don't know why that pairing exists in my brain. It's just, it is a card game where I only play this 2-player, and you are carefully fighting over a tableau where you are using your cards and spending your cards to put out other cards, but then you're trying to guess what the other player is doing to get bonus actions to sort of follow in a way. I find this game amazing. Length of game to depth of play with optional expansions if you want them. This is one that I could just see going really off the deep end with. I don't find it as bombastic as Innovation, but it is quite the card game, and I love card games. You gotta love it. You gotta love Race for the Galaxy.
I will say I agree with you on every point there. I will also say that this is a game where I try to take into account all player counts when it comes to ranking a game, but for me, like, Race for the Galaxy is only a 2-player game. I think the drop between Race for the Galaxy at 2 versus 3 and 4 is precipitous. It's a way worse game, I think, at 3 and 4 than 2. And at 2, though, it is amazing. And it's just everything you said. I at first didn't see the correlation between Innovation and Race for the Galaxy, but there is that follow thing, and there's the fact that it's a completely card-based thing, and you're looking for broken combinations or ways to score immediately and quickly. It's like time is of the essence, and so there is definitely that shared DNA. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that.
I don't know that I've played Race for the Galaxy at 2, which could go a long way to explaining why I just feel like the odd person out and not really getting it.
Oh, yeah. I would say Race for the Galaxy at 2 is a game I love. Race for the Galaxy at 3 or 4, God forbid 4. I would never want to play at 4. But even at 3, though, it's a much lesser product, in my opinion.
The primary difference being you're choosing 2 actions each at right. 2 players, so you just have a lot more control about what is happening than with a little bonus for what they do. So a little bit of figuring it out, but mostly doing your own thing just quicker than the other person.
Yeah, I would say to anybody out there that if you're like Neilan, you've only played it at 3-player, like, please do yourself a favor. You may not love it, but it's like a totally different game at 2 versus 3.
Okay. My number 31 on my list is new to the list, and gosh, I don't know that any game sort of came in with a crash and made an impact on me like as dramatically this year as War of the Rings 2nd Edition. This is a big, splashy, very long thematic game. I guess it's not crazy long, but you're looking at 2 to 3 hours once you get past the rule set of it. But that said, I probably played this more than I expected to this year, all with our good friend Daniel, longtime Sunshine in the Discord, who was very happy to have him have taught me this game. Gotten to the point where I'm now able to hold my own against him, he is a very seasoned player. I think if you are a fan of Lord of the Rings, this is the game that encapsulates almost the entirety of the book, whether it's the battles that are happening across the landscape, the journey of the Fellowship from the Shire to Mordor. It's all encapsulated there. It's got cool, fun, splashy cards that represent the events that happen in the game, just remixed in different ways that will feel different from game to game. You have to be okay with a little bit of funkiness. There's a little bit of randomness that will sometimes dictate the way events fall out, but it's all going to be in the service of a very cool, unique story to your specific session. Gosh, this is an incredible game. This is War of the Ring.
I remember, and I had the exact same instinct as the first time you talked about it, to try to convince you that you only like it because it's Lord of the Rings. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I've already made this comment.
Look, I won't argue that that's not a big part of it. In fact, I will happily concede that. I think that if this was any other IP, like disparate from something that I had a whole lot of passion for, it probably wouldn't be up there. But it feels like playing Lord of the Rings. That is not something that every Lord of the Rings themed game actually captures, to be quite honest.
Yeah. I started trying to hum the music for you to kind of provide background music, but then I was like, no, this is the Harry Potter song. And that's how much I care about Lord of the Rings. The script of Rings of Power, oh my God, it was so good.
The less we talk about that, the better, in my opinion.
My 31st favorite game of all time. So I had 3 games in a row there. True Colors, Anomia, and Ricochet Robots, which are more like activities in games. And another trilogy of games, Dominant Species, Cthulhu Wars, and Archipelago, my 31st favorite game of all time. This one down 15 spots as games that I feel like are dropping just because of how unwieldy they are to get out on the table. This is a double crossover with Neilan. And yes, I love everything about Archipelago in theory and also in practice. The fact that it's a semi-co-op game that I think does semi-co-op as well as you can. You are all fighting over an island, fighting for resources, fighting to achieve your goal while trying to figure out the goals other players have, while trying to figure out if there's a traitor in your midst that's trying to tank the entire experience. Just the issue with it is I just have not gotten it to the table as much as I wanted to. I think it's a game that some players will be turned off by, just the semi-co-opness, the fact that it can be quite brutal, especially if you have a traitor. You can get to points where there's a crisis on the island and you are expected to work together, but one player says, you know what, no, I know you have more pineapples than me. I know you've been amassing them. I'm not paying any pineapples, and if the game ends now, the game ends now, and so be it. So it can be rough, can be a tough game to propose to play, but one that I have enjoyed every time I've played, and one that we will be adding to the list of games on Dice Tower West.
Oh my God.
So hopefully moving up after that play. So Archipelago number 31 for me.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've already said my piece about Archipelago, but I will say if there's one game that the four of us have played that I most want to return to, it is probably this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that, actually.
Speaking of games, to add to the list, my 31st favorite game of all time, and before I start my 1 minute countdown, Phil Eklund, is one Pax Porfiriana. If you don't know, look up Phil Eklund, not a good dude. But Pax Porfiriana is a card game where you are... It's so hard to describe Pax Porfiriana. If you've played any of the Pax series of games, they all share some similar structures, or at least I think that they do, which is some kind of market row with a pricing that gets more expensive as you go up the market row, as new cards come out, with shared incentives and also disparate win conditions or different ways that the game could end. And Pax Porfiriana takes that structure, but it takes place in Mexico during some turbulent time where you're sort of figuring out which of the different dudes you want to try to pledge allegiance to and overthrow the government, but also the game could end in a straightforward way, and then there's just an economic component to who wins the game. This game tells stories. Unlike any game I have ever played, it is and called by many, the innovation of PAX games. This takes PAX Premier, which by comparison is very stated, and just goes wild and zany and crazy and silly and over the top, and things just flip and flop. This is one that I think that Christina would even love if we could get her over the crest of like playing it, because there's a lot here, a lot of thematic stuff. And again, like me, I don't care about theme. I don't care about it being a historical anything, but it is pretty silly when you're like recruiting. You know, you get your horses, you get your guns, and you get your saloons, and you're trying to make sure that you are just emerging victorious in this like shifting landscape of a game. Pax Porfiriana, one of the craziest card games ever made.
I am incredibly jealous of you for having played this. Like, this is one that I desperately want to play.
It's so wild. Like, it's like take Pax Premier and then just keep going. Go hard. Right. Card driven, zany. It's really good.
So that is going to do it for this part of the top 50, games 40 through 31. Join us again next week when we go through games 30 through 21. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You can find us on all forms of social media. You can join the discussion on Discord and let us know what you think about this group of 10 top games on our list. Let us know what your top games are by going to boardgamebarrage.com/Discord and chatting with us there. There is lively discussion all year long. Thank you so much to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? And until next week, when we get to 30 through 21, goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Kellen recording locally. Are we doing the same order each time?
We can.
I think we do the same order. Just start with the next person in the line, basically.
Like whoever the host is. The next
I see
person
what you're
starts.
saying. So
yeah.
it is not the same order, rather.
No. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah. So whoever is after you in the order, if you're the host, yeah, whoever's after you in the order.
Yeah.
Although what we did last time was whoever was before you.
No, sorry, you're right. Whoever's before you in the order is who you start with.
Yeah.
Oh, so that you speak last is the thought?
So you speak second.
Well, this is very complicated. I don't know.
Really?
All right, do we want to clap?
Yeah. 3, 2, 1.
Let's leave it to us to figure out how to complicate the order thing. Like, You're saying because and this is like, I think a lot of our confusion comes because Neilan has like a math brain, or like a just like, oh yeah, it just makes sense, and I'm just like, can't we just do it the way we did it last time, where I go like, because I know that I'm for second or third,
right.
like it's just like, and you're like, no, just go in reverse turn order of blah blah blah.
It's like the natural progression. Yeah.
Yeah. The bottom of the crust filling up with text, guys. Oh, is it me?
It is.
Yes.
I'm going to ask every time because you keep changing the turn order, Neilan.
Never
It's
do.
literally the same turn
No,
order.
it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. All right. My 38th favorite.